Hi there, my name is Tyler Esselman.
And I'm Michael Osinski.
And this is This One Goes to 11.
It's This One Goes to 11. It's our music podcast, a podcast about music, where we invite someone on, maybe someone we know, maybe someone we don't know, maybe someone we only kind of know a little bit. The point is, we invite them on because they have an album that they want to talk about, an album that they believe is just absolutely frickin' perfect.
So perfect, in fact, Michael. So perfect that 10 out of 10 just isn't good enough.
It sure ain't.
It sure ain't. And we've got a barn burner today. We have a true musician himself, a true Renaissance man, a brilliant writer, and good friend of the pod, Eric Richardson, on with us today. This is a good one, isn't it?
It sure is. Why don't you tell us all about this wonderful human being?
He's wonderful. Eric Matthew Richardson, born 1992, is a composer, writer, and sound designer based in Chicago, Illinois. His recent credits include an original full-length musical, The Book of Sebastian, produced by the Jacobins, an online interactive hyper-musical, the L.E.A Project, which is a self-produced digital work of his, music for the immersive show Cursed, an American Tragedy with Birch House Immersive, the 10-minute musicals Pegasus and Roleplay with Chicago dramatists, music for the video poem Let This Be by Paloma Sierra, the emerging poet laureate of Allegheny County. And he has been featured as one of William Finn's emerging writers in the New York Theater Barn. His latest, which is just a great name for a thing, the New York Theater Barn.
Yeah.
I love that. His latest musical, Down and Out in Rocky Heights, was a 2022 semifinalist for the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center National Musical Theater Conference. So he's got credentials.
He's the real deal, y'all.
He's credentialed. And I have had the pleasure of working with him on a few of those projects in that nice little bio. The Book of Sebastian, which was his first full-length, wonderful show. Very proud of the work we did putting that up in Chicago a few years ago. And I performed in the L.E.A Project, that online hyper musical, which we'll leave the link in the bio for everybody. But this is a great one, and we're talking musical theater. We think you're going to enjoy it very much. Should we get on to this, Michael?
Yeah, let's roll right into it. I think maybe some of you might have heard of the show. I mean, maybe. We'll see.
Maybe.
I don't know.
One or two.
Yeah. All right, let's give it a listen.
I did wear my my lucky every time I try to, because I go on a Sondheim podcast a lot, and I always try to wear this. I don't know if you can see it, but it is Stephen Sondheim smoking a J.
Yeah, an excellent T-shirt,
classic shirt.
Eric Richardson, welcome to This One Goes to 11, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
How are things in Sweet Home Chicago?
They are fine. The weather is finally turning. I can break out the sweaters, the turtlenecks. Wore a turtleneck at work the whole day today. No one even complimented me.
That seems
menswear
wrong.
is dead.
Menswear might be dead.
Streetwear world now,
Not only are you a turtleneck guy, you're also a cardigan guy. Something I like about you.
Yeah, I
have
a
cardigan.
I kind of got a cardigan on now.
You do.
Bit.
You do.
Yeah.
Respect. Bold choices.
Bold
choices. Well, welcome to This One Goes to 11. We're super excited to have you, and we are doubly excited to talk about an excellent album that is yet another entry into our. We should figure out how to what we actually want to call this type of album, but it is an excellent one. And Eric, tell us, which album did you bring before the tribunal today?
All right, so I decided I write musical theater.
Yes, you
so
do.
I felt the need to at least submit something musical theater-y. But I gave you an easy one. I gave you one that's palatable, okay? We're talking Stephen Sondheim's Company, but the 2006 production.
Yes.
As
opposed to the
original.
1970. Yep, and
Correct.
There's the current one too. It's currently running on Broadway, right? And you saw it?
I think it has shut down.
Closed.
Has it closed?
I think it
Okay.
just closed. Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. But you did see it.
I did not. I saw
no.
Assassins. I saw Assassins when I went.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, we're going to get into all that. First, we have everyone's favorite segment, which Mr. Michael Osinski is doing the heavy lifting, a Herculean task that he's doing today, which is everyone's favorite segment, the beginner's guide to Stephen Sondheim's Company 2006 cast recording in 60 seconds. So, Michael, do you feel ready?
I mean, as ready. I feel like this season we have a lot of heavy hitters, and I feel like I've been doing a lot of intros, a lot of 60-second intros for people whose careers really go well beyond 60 seconds. Yeah. But I'm not complaining. I'm just articulating.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained. That's what I have to say.
But all right, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Let's do this. 60 seconds are on the clock. You may begin in 3, 2, 1, go.
Have I got a show for you, Tyler? Wait till you hear it. It's written by American musical theater icon Mr. Stephen Joshua Sondheim, born 1930 in New York City. He was mentored by Oscar Hammerstein, not sure there, the second, who gave Stephen some pretty extensive college-level assignments to hone his skills. You could drive a person crazy with all the musicals he wrote, but today we're talking about Company, originally produced in 1970, winner of the Tony Award for Best Musical. Inspired by a series of one-act plays written by George Firth, revolutionary for its use of vignettes and its loosely structured plot, Company is all about a single man in New York named Bobby, turning 35 and figuring out what to do with his life. The 2006 revival of the musical, which also won the Tony, featured everyone's favorite assistant DA on SVU, Raul Esparza, as Bobby. It also featured a cast who provided their own orchestral accompaniment by playing instruments on stage. The most recent revival of the show, which also won the Tony, changed the gender identities of several characters, including the lead, with Sondheim's approval. But sadly, Sondheim died this past November at the age of 91.
Is it just like a line? Is it just like a line that you have left, or was that it?
No, that was it. That's it.
Oh,
I was trying to think if there was like a lyric I could end on that, but I'm like, what if I said everybody? Yeah. If I said everybody rise, that it felt inappropriate. So I was kind of like, if I had said that, y'all would have been like, that's weird, right?
Eric, we have to have your assessment of what you thought of that. How did Michael do recapping Sondheim and Company in 60 seconds?
Using your own scale.
For my own scale, I think for 60 seconds, that's about the best you could have done. It's, he's got a long bio, right? And it's how do you cram what perhaps some would consider the modern day Shakespeare into 60 seconds? I don't know. But you did a commendable job.
So if you had to give it a point value, what would you give? Or it can be like it could be a lyric. It could be a lyric to.
I think I would give it a 2, but that's out of 2.
Oh, 2 out of 2.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Right.
I like that. So 2 out of 2 for that job.
Yeah,
Michael. But let's start with another colossi of the musical theater, which is our friend Eric Richardson. Eric, I'm a huge admirer of your work. Your musical work, and you live a truly musical life. But let's talk about kind of where it all started for you. What was your relationship with music growing up, and how would you
it's kind of you to say that I live a musical life, because most of the time I'm these days I'm just playing PlayStation 5. But no, it's hard to say like where music started with me. My mom continues to be a very musical person. She piano teacher growing up. She was a worship director. She's currently a music therapist. She's worked with hospice doing music. She's done most recently she was a director of a choir for people with Parkinson's. She played piano in all our concerts growing up for the schools. She so it really stems from her, and even that stems from her father.
Wow.
Yeah, even that stems from her father, who played jazz piano and a little bit of banjo, which is actually right behind me. That's his.
Sweet.
So it's I don't know. Growing up in a household, you gain things by osmosis, but she also put us through, piano lessons and got us into the choir. And I took upright bass lessons when I was a kid. So, but it was mostly like coming from classical instruction, which I hated, mostly because my sister, who was older than me, therefore starting these things before me, was always better, right? She was always like she was already like performing, and she's a better performer than I am, I think, at a lot of things. Because I don't consider myself a performer, at least at a performance level, like piano and stuff. I think very compositionally, but I can't play that well.
Says you.
So
I play pretty damn well.
I play enough to get by, but if a piano player were to listen to me play, they would know, But I started getting involved with like the worship band at church, and that's really where I started like gaining some chops and like playing with a band, and like I started learning about song structure and started writing songs in like my basement when I'm like in middle school, and they're just terrible songs, right? Just terrible, horrible songs. And then
supposed to be.
Yeah. And then I got really interested in that stuff. So less so much like the performance aspect and more about the like piecing it all together. I don't know. I guess you could call it a composer's mind, but I don't know. I thought of it more of like I wanted to play in a band, right? Went to school at DePaul for music. I was in the school of music there, but I did
600 points for Go Blue Demons.
Yeah, I was
your first points on the board.
I did sound recording technology there, so I was learning, more of a technical degree, but allowed me a lot of studio time to tinker, and played in bands in college too, and started writing less terrible songs, but maybe not great.
What made you go on the sound engineer route as opposed to any of the other musical routes you could have gone?
I think I knew what I was not capable of in terms of performance. I think maybe if I were to do a performance degree, I could do bass, but I got frustrated a lot by performance. I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to that kind of technical ability, I guess. And I was thinking more, I don't know, macro level in terms of like, the overall piece or how I feel about things, less so the hyper specifics of like intonation and it's a different brain that you're using. And I guess there's a practical side to it too, where I was like, well, if I can't be a performer, I got to find a way to make a living after school, So getting somewhat of a technical degree, I think, it's applicable somewhat in other fields. It can dovetail nicely, and I like tinkering around a lot. So I don't know, it satisfied that little analytical side of my brain, I think. But yeah, I don't know. It's why do we choose any? It's kind of a weird thing. Like why do 18-year-olds get to dictate their entire lives going into college?
Word.
Yeah.
Too much power. We should all have gap years, I think.
Yeah, or maybe like
my
gap
main regret
4 years. It's just it's like I don't think even by the time I graduated, I felt like I don't know, knew anything. It is a weird. I feel like degrees they teach you how much there is to learn.
They teach you some like honest perspective on what the value of money is in our country too. They really, for good or for ill.
I had a great professor, the sound recording professor. His name's Tom Miller. He's still there. Was great about introducing us to kinds of music that we never really experienced before, in a very hyper focused way. Even just like with a lot of music history that you learn in school, it's very segmented. You start with antiquity and work your way up. But in this class, we started with the Impressionists, so Debussy, which is in currently we consider it classical old, but you got to consider that's not 2,000 years old or something. So you're starting more recent and then working up towards like John Cage and then just like expanding into Xenakis, and you're finding the stuff that you don't understand yet, but maybe you're picking up something along the way to put in your little compositional tool belt. So I am grateful for that, and he's I don't know, Tom Miller has a mind unlike anyone else. Just truly a one of a kind person. So to be in that orbit, I think helped me become somewhat of a composer. I never really composed, right? I had written songs for bands, but I'd never written like a I don't know, like a piece that stands on its own. And I think after school, I'd been in a band. I felt like maybe that part of my life was over. And after school, I started transitioning into writing some music for theater, for some, DIY theater projects around town. And then just through doing that, I guess, got the fool's idea of writing musicals, which is, I don't know,
that's
of
a pretty recent thing then. I mean, that's just only been in the last several years. It was, so you never thought about writing musicals when you were in high school or younger?
I did. I was in the drama club in high school. I was president of the drama club for my nerd badge. Just
750 points for that, Mr. President.
Yeah. And I remember in our drama class, we all for our final, I think we had to write something. We had to write either an analytical essay or we could write like a play. And so I wrote this 30-minute musical. I actually don't. I have not even thought about this in probably 10 years. But it was a retelling of the Book of Job, but with by way of like David Bowie, like a David Bowie glam rock. And I doubt it is worth anything, but it's funny to just. I mean, so I was interested.
Oh, I
like the idea of it. I like the idea of writing a musical. I was into musicals. And I guess you always have your practice stuff early, and it's like a way to learn what not to do, or maybe just get the bad stuff out of the way and then move on to the next thing. But yeah, so I guess it was in me. I mean, it was always percolating. I just never took the plunge.
Yeah, I think college is all about getting the bad stuff out.
Oh, yeah.
I think about, there was a show I directed in college that it was, I did everything wrong that I could have done wrong, ranging from like artistic choices to personal relationships, and it was just a nightmare. Yeah. But I mean, I sort of hear what you're saying though about the fact that, like, whether it's a gap year or 4 years, or a gap 4 years or whatever, that. I mean, I teach at a college level now, and I think about how uninterested I was in a lot of the material in college, that now I'm like, ooh, give me a book on that. Like, yes, I will read this entire history book that I would not have touched at the age of 20.
And that's weird. I think that weirdly connects to the album we're going to talk about today. And I don't want to get ahead of this, but that's sort of my experience with this album in particular over time, where I discovered this way too early, didn't connect with it, and then kind of had a revisit later and just became obsessed with it. And it reminds me of like when you're in high school, you get these great works of literature thrust upon you, like All Quiet on the Western Front or something, right? Now I'm a freshman in high school. I'm 14. I've never even been in a fight by this point. Like, I don't know what war is. I don't know what the world outside is like. Now, if I were to read it again now, it's like, I'm probably heartbreaking over these, kids who are just getting slaughtered for no reason. But at the time, I'm like, oh, it's a war book or whatever. So it's I don't know. It's weird how we thrust these things on people before maybe they're ready for them. But maybe it's important to thrust those things on people because that's how you expose them to what the world can be.
I was going to say, I think it takes a very special piece of art, literature, whatever it might be, to get through to a kid that is 15, 16, 17 years old and actually touch them on some kind of like larger emotional level. I remember one of the only books that I was truly emotionally touched by in middle school was Night by L.E.A. And I'll never forget that either, because I was the same way. I didn't know what I wanted to read. I liked reading, but I didn't have any taste about it. And reading Night was a watershed in terms of like emotionally connecting with a piece.
Yeah.
But let's pivot to Company then. Let's pivot to Company itself.
Yeah, I mean, how did you discover this album? Is there a story of when you first heard it, or like how did it come into your life?
So in my hometown in Ohio, we had a library, if you can believe it. But the library, I rarely went to get books there. I would go there a lot to get albums. Like, just peruse. They had a pretty good selection of CDs. I don't know who picked that out or curated that, but I basically just did lazy man's pirating before I discovered uTorrent or BitTorrent. So I'd go to the library and check something out, dump it into iTunes, and then burn the CD. And I'm like, wow, you can just do this. No one's stopping me. But they had a good like modern Broadway selection. So I had heard about Company because, like I said, this was 2006. So 2006, I was a freshman in high school. But this would have been maybe when I was a sophomore or a junior. I would have actually picked this up because they're not getting fresh releases. They're getting a little year or two later.
It's a library, yeah,
it's a library. And I had been in Into the Woods by this point, which is every person's first time with Sondheim.
Baby's first Sondheim.
Yeah, and it's a good entry point, right? It's like, and that's what. Oh, I was Cinderella's prince.
Oh,
yeah.
I would kill to see you sing
Great
Agony.
role.
That'd be great.
But that's a show that is
4,000 points for
designed.
that.
Yeah, that's a show that he designed specifically for high school productions, basically, right? It's like an easy entry. It's like it's complex, but not too complex in terms of being able to perform it. And it's a great way to teach about some music theory as well. But I just, people, when they talked about Sondheim, the Sondheim guy, they talked about him as if he were like a god, like this, like this reverent figure. And I'm like, well, I got to figure out a little more. And so, you research a little online or whatever, and, you hear about Company, and, it's this kind of launching point for him. And so I was fascinated, and I decided to peruse the local library, and there's this new version of Company. So I'd picked it up, and I'd had it in my iTunes for a long time. And I remember listening to it in the car, and it just didn't click. I knew something was there. I knew it was good. Like I could tell it was good, but it was like, this is not for me. And I mean, part of it is I was in high school. No high schooler is going to connect with this, right? It's like, it's not like, I don't know. It might have been the environment, or I just wasn't ready for it, or what. But it was like, I don't know. It just didn't land with me. It was
you were a kid in Ohio,
right?
In suburban Ohio, and this was like the New York mid-30s. It doesn't surprise me at all that you didn't connect with it.
It felt like when I was a kid, when I was a real little kid, my dad had a big, thick copy of Lord of the Rings, and this was pre-movies, and he loved it. And I remember going down and sneaking a look inside, and I read a couple pages, and I'm looking at this, just like staring at these words, and it's like, I know these are words. Like, I see them, and I know they're words. It means nothing to me. It's like I'm reading, and it's just washing over me, and I felt like maybe that was my first experience with Company too, where I'm like, I know this means a lot to someone, but man, it's like, I don't know what this is. However, a couple years go by, I'm in college. This is probably late college. You start expanding your music taste, but I still had all my CDs I had burned, or like loaded into iTunes, still just like sitting in my which iTunes was still around then. I don't think they even use it anymore.
I don't know. Yeah.
So I went back to it, and it just like clicked, and I felt it more. I like understood Bobby as a character. I found the PBS recording of it, and it just like, I don't know, it struck like a lightning bolt, and I just became obsessed with it for man, probably 5 years. It's like, that's like one of the few things I would like throw on if I'm like having a weird day. I'd like to throw it on if I'm walking home at night or something. And I mean, I'm still obsessed with it. Like I still come back to it all the time, but at the time, like it was just like hyper fixated on this thing. And I don't know if it was my environment or like my social groupings at the time, or if I was just becoming more slightly mature. I don't think that's a funny statement to say, because I think Bobby struggles with his own maturity in this. because I think Bobby is somewhat immature in the show. Robert, I should say. But it's weird how these like times and places can affect your perception of a work of art.
Well, I think Sondheim is also just kind of a tough sell for young people overall. Yeah. I tend to think of his musicals as being way more sophisticated than most of the stuff that has been written and that continues to be written. And when you stage a Sondheim musical, it's not about the bells and whistles. It's about the communication. It's about the performances. It's about the musicality. It's about the relationships. It's about really much more mature stuff. And frankly, as someone who played piano, and my discovery of Sondheim came from a cabaret that I played for in college, playing Sondheim is really hard. There is nothing. It seems musically complex, and the rhythms are changing rhythms at the drop of a hat, and weird dissonances at times that I know are really meaningful dissonances. Like now, whenever I listen to a Sondheim musical and I hear a dissonance, I'm like, oh wait, what does he mean there? Why are they singing a dissonance there? Because he has a reason. But, when you're a teenager and, you got the lead in the Pajama Game or, Bye Bye Birdie, it's just not the same. He's kind of on a different level.
Which Hal Prince incidentally directed the original, or was a producer on the original production of the Pajama Game as well.
Hal Prince had his little fingers in so many pies.
He sure did.
But and I think that it's funny that you talk about the I think you were saying like how you got to strip it down when you're staging it to something that's it's a type of material that you really got to let the words live. It doesn't need the staging. Sure, you can do Sweeney. Like Sweeney, you can do these giant sets, you can do whatever, but then there's another John Doyle. That's kind of what put him on the Sondheim map, was his production of Sweeney right before this, where he stripped it down. He did the what do you call it, actor muso, the actors are playing all the instruments, and
Which still blows my mind, by the way. It's one of the most impressive things about this production in particular is they're all playing the shit out of those instruments.
Yeah, and it's
really
well. It's funny, like John Doyle, he's an older man now. I think he's retiring right now. It is sort of his gimmick in terms of like doing Sondheim, like he did Sweeney, then this, and then I think Roadshow, maybe they played instruments, I don't remember, and then just recently Assassins, they played instruments as well. So it is sort of like maybe a one-trick pony kind of thing, but the reason why I like it so much with Company is how he ties it into like the thematic content of the show, where everyone around Robert is playing an instrument. Robert does not touch a single instrument until he sits down to play Being Alive at the piano. He does get a kazoo solo, but it's tying this like connection with the music into Robert's like disconnect with his inner desires. And I think that's why it really lands with this, and it is so stripped down. It's so different from the original. The original, I don't know if people are familiar, it's like this huge kind of swinging, it was 70s, but it still had the 60s style to it. Kind of, I don't know, it's game show sounding. It's hard to describe. But it was like very much
cha-cha to it.
It was very much a time and a place, right? It was like 1970s New York. Whereas this production strips all that away, very sterile set. The costuming is all pretty much black. And the orchestrations now are this like a chamber opera kind of thing. And it's small, it's intimate. You don't get lost in this like big, blasting of horns. It's very like, it lets the lyrics breathe a little. And you feel more attached to the characters in a way. And it's weird how just, changing the instrumentation can affect that. But it's something that I still like am in love with. Like it's influenced so much of like the way I orchestrate things, where I've never really done the classic Broadway big band sound. I've always done these like hyper tiny, like, I don't know, 5 to 6 person sort of instrumentation sounds. And yeah, I don't know. It's a very influential instrumental palette for me, I guess.
Yeah. You get a 999 points for talking about how it lets the music breathe. These
are the sorts of phrases
breathe.
that I like to pepper into my conversation to make people feel like I know what I'm talking about.
Well, you're convincing me.
Yeah. It's weird, right? It's a weird show. I think it is so different from what we think of as musical theater. It is more like, I don't know, like a cabaret almost, with a somewhat of a through line. Like it was experimental, and it's wild that this was on Broadway and successful. You'd call it non-chronological, I guess, but I don't think it even is. I think it's like achronological, if anything, where it's like right. I don't even think these little vignettes that are happening, who's to say they even exist? You know, maybe it's just like these representational manifestations of his angst. It's like this, I don't know. It doesn't really take place in a world, I guess. It's just all sort of him bouncing around in this purgatory. Sondheim is big on this. He has 3 rules when it comes to writing, and one of the major one is content dictates form. He is never one to come at something with the formal rule, like a formal idea, and then create a show out of that. He's always looking at the skeleton that's there, and then
what's the story?
Yeah, and then building off of that. That's like, I mean, content dictates form is like so.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's how do you encapsulate such a giant idea into just 3 words? You know.
Mm-hmm. Although I feel like every theater piece I've ever made is form first.
Sure.
But that's where Sondheim and I differ. That's the only place, though. That's the only place we differ.
Yeah.
Well, I think now it's time we should talk about what your standout track from this recording is.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would be remiss not to say that it is Being Alive. It's like it is the thing that ties. It's the gut punch. It's the reason why this works. There were for a long time that was not. I mean, not the long time, but originally this was not the ending song. There were other things in place, and it just never quite landed. And once he put this song in, it really it tied the whole show together, you know? And I think it's just so, I mean, it's so cliche to say like, oh, it's profound, but it is, right? It's rarely do you get a song that is about being, I don't know, frightened of other people and like that's the conflict, but like knowing that you need another person to truly live, and like I don't know, it's such a complex, and it's a feeling that I think everyone has, where so many people deal with commitment issues, whether that's being open to commitment or you know, too open to commitment or too closed off. It's just something that everyone deals with, is like trying to just navigate this weird world of relationships. And at a time when I was fresh out of school, all my close friends were in these basically like long-term relationships where, you know, one of my friends had been dating his high school girlfriend still, and others had gotten together their freshman year of college or something. And I was the one sort of bouncing around from couple to couple. And so you can tell why this show really like landed the way it did, because it was like, oh, am I this guy? And sure, I was having fun. It wasn't like, you know, woe was me or anything, but you know, there's that little itch in the back of your head of like, is that all there is? You know, that little run he does where it's like someone to sit in your chair to ruin your sleep. Right. It's such a minute line. It's something so small that means like so much. It's just like, you can pack so much into the specificity of that. And that's what Sondheim's great at, right? Where a lot of people, when they parody him or something, they go for these overly complex rhymes or these like, you know, they're trying to be too intellectual, and that's not really what Sondheim does. He does a very simple, clean lyric that can mean so much more. It's all about the context it's in. It's about the lines that come before it. And I think this song, and especially the turn in this song, from going from like a declaration of everything that you hate about a relationship into a confession, or like a plea that, like, please someone come save me from myself, in a way. And the way that he does that while using the same language, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't get better than that,
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, we should just give it a listen, I think.
I think we're going to listen to that right now.
There we go.
That's the end of part 1. If you access this episode via our YouTube playlist, you're about to hear our guest's standout track. If you'd like to jump ahead to part 2, you'll find a link in the description of this episode.